since that day, now I want to ask once more that the state of Mississippi either try me or dismiss the charges and give me my $1,000 back. I need it. Medgar Evers returned from 2.5 years of service in the uniform of his country, where he fought in World War II, came back to his native state of Mississippi, determined that the kind of Hitlerism that he had eliminated from Europe should also be eliminated from his home state. And he could not rest easily until he was in the thick of this. He chose the NAACP as his vehicle. He was fighting for full citizenship, and he was fighting against fear. Now, James Meredith started out the other day on a walk from Memphis to Jackson, Mississippi, and his objective was, like Medgar Evers, full citizenship, voting and registration, and against fear. And he, like Medgar, was a native Mississippian, born and reared in this state and educated here, and the first one able to say that he had been graduated from the University of Mississippi. He too, like Medgar, had served his country in the armed forces and had come home, determined that some of the democracy for which he had been fighting in other corners of the globe should be enjoyed by his people here in Mississippi. Both of these men were not afraid, and both in their ways were impatient. I don't know, some of you who might not have known Medgar so well, Medgar was always fretting at how slow things were and how long it took to do things. And Medgar was impatient with protocol and ritual and procedure. And he used to say, why can't we do it now? And then when some great tragedy would fall upon his people, he was tempted for a moment, because he had strong feelings and strong convictions and great love of freedom. And so he kept pressing forward. As Reverend Smith said, even in death, he fell forward. This was not merely symbolic. In 1963, for example, he kept worrying us on the telephone to New York, saying we ought to get on with the program of desegregation in Jackson. And we said back to him, we're all for it. How many people are behind you? He said, well, we have the young people. And I said to him on one of our conversations, Medgar, how many of the adults do you have? We don't want to start out with the youngsters and have the adults sit on their hands and go back in the back porch and not even look out. And Medgar said, well, I'll tell you the truth. We don't have many adults. They want to come along, but I think they're afraid. And he said some of them, of course, are Uncle Tom's. Well, he didn't blame all of them for that. You must not blame everybody who disagrees with you as an Uncle Tom. But he said some of them are Uncle Toms and some of them are afraid. But he said if we have the youth and we have a few old folks, can't we start? And I said, Medgar, go ahead, start. And I sometimes get a little tired of people who say that Negro Mississippians are afraid and they have to come down here like missionaries and save you. I don't know how they thought you lived down here all this time. You know, you lived down here because you were smart enough and brave enough to live here. And now we have on this march some people who don't see it as a cooperative venture, another brick in the building of freedom, but they see it as a sort of a competitive business. And One of them said the other day, why, we're holding meetings in Mississippi churches, and 3 years ago they couldn't do that. Now, I wonder where he's been. Because I know we've been holding meetings in this hall for longer than 3 years because I've been coming down here speaking to you. When the policemen were sitting all across the back row there, you remember? And when they were sitting down below on the street trying to discourage you from coming in here. You remember that? Yeah. Trying to frighten you. And then you walked right on by them and came on in here. So let nobody say that Mississippians need missionaries to come here. We welcome. I say we because, as I've told you many times before, my parents were born in Holly Springs, and there's a little bit of Mississippi in me, you know, even though I've been away a long time. But all my people came from Holly Springs. And we Mississippians don't mind them coming in to help us. We need help. But if anybody comes here with the idea that he's going to save our souls, then that's something else again. Mississippi has been having NAACP chapters since 1918. And that's before a whole lot of folks up in Ohio and Michigan had nerve enough to join the NAACP. But they were joining it in Vicksburg and other places down here in Mississippi. We welcome the present march. The NAACP welcomes the march. Mississippians welcome the march. If, as your state director said, Charles Evers the other day, we welcome them if they're going to help us, and especially with registration and voting, because we have been carrying the burden for a long time now by ourselves, looking around wondering where they were. Well, here they come, and you use them while they're here. Medgar sought several things. First, jobs. And the whole operation on Capitol Street was for jobs. He was no dreamer. He was a worker. He sought school desegregation. He used his own children in a lawsuit to desegregate the schools, and oh my, if he were here now to see the beginning of the dream he had. It isn't finished by any means. There are just a few scattering children here and there, and there's resistance. But when he was here, there was not even a beginning. You remember over in Yazoo City, Mississippi, way back in 1956, the parents in Yazoo City signed a petition to desegregate the schools, and 52 out of 53 of them had to leave town. I always tell people that who tell me that Negroes in Mississippi are afraid. Well, Medgar was for school desegregation. He was for the ending of segregation in parks and playgrounds, travel. You remember when he came up on a bus from South Mississippi to Jackson and wouldn't sit in the back, and the driver called the policeman, and the policeman jumped on Medgar? He wouldn't ask you to do anything he wouldn't do. And if he was leading you, he was going to lead you from in front, not from behind. Then he believed in voting. Your voting struggle goes back, way back in Mississippi. You remember Humphreys County, Reverend George Lee and Belzoni? We have a chapter of the NAACP in Belzoni. And when Reverend Lee was shot, his jaw was shot away with a shotgun one night, and then he lost control of the car naturally. With your jaw shot away, you aren't running a car either. And the car ran into a telephone pole. And the sheriff down there said that he lost his life through an automobile accident. And somebody asked him, what about the lead pellets in his jaw? And he said, oh, that's just the fillings from the teeth, from dentistry. Now, this was 1955. It was 11 years ago. Before a lot of people who now want to save you, before they ever knew there was any such thing as fighting for voting rights in Mississippi, Reverend Lee and others in Humphreys County, where we went down and held a memorial service in the Elks Hall, and the whole town police force came out, 3 men. And they sat right in front to see that nothing happened. Oh yes, Medgar can tell the story. You can tell the story of the struggle in Mississippi. Why are we here today? We're here on account, of course, of a great man. But we're also here, I suggest, on account of his great work, on account of the things that we see happening, because of the rich life that he lived, even though he was a young man when he was cut down. Civil Rights Bill, which will try to take into the federal courts the crimes such as the shooting of James Meredith and killing of Medgar Evers, and not have them tried in the state courts. And if this marching and all of this agitation is to mean anything at all, it means that we must create new weapons, enact new laws, and do something about what a man said behind on the platform. Nothing has been done about in Medgar Evers yet. Well, I can tell him a lot of things that nothing has been done about. But I tell you, with the faith that you must have as you kneel down every night and say your prayers, and the faith you must have as you go to church every Sunday, you have to have faith in the things that are unseen. And you have to have a belief that these things will change. This new bill will do that. I started to say write to your senators and write to your congressmen. But that's not a phrase that belongs here, because they have not yet. The day is coming, but not yet have they shown that they will respond to what you write to them in Washington. But one of these days they will. You'll get answers from them. You'll get votes from them. Because if you don't, you will have somebody. I mean, if you win this battle against yourself, for your own dignity, for your own fulfillment, you will hate hateful institutions and not hate people. And then Medgar was steadfast in his work, and we've got to be steadfast. We've got to keep at it. And then Medgar had integrity and warm love of his family and a warm love of people. And you've seen some of that in his brother, who works here carrying on, and so effectively in the work that he began. No, our president said that if these conditions are going to be corrected, the Negro will have to do most of it himself, but he cannot do it alone. And he said he has to battle, among other things, a feeling whose dark intensity is matched by no other prejudice in our society. We know what that intensity is. And we know how deeply it's rooted. But my friends, I say to you, as Medgar would have said if he were here today, someday we will have a United States of America where a man will not be judged by the color of his skin, nor his children nor his family limited in where they can live and study and work and grow and flower by their race or nationality. And I say to you even more earnestly that someday we will have a Mississippi that way, a Mississippi that Medgar Evers would be proud and happy to come back to. Thank you.
The shepherd of the flock.
Voice is a good one, swine and training. The blood of James Meredith cries from the soil in the highway of Mississippi today. This blood cry because their death must not be in vain. We come to commemorate.
You have not forgotten him, and that he did not die in vain. I have a decision I had to make. It's been hard. I know you know that I've been said that today I had an announcement I was going to make, whether I was going to stay on with the association Well, I was going to head up a voter registration in Mississippi. It wasn't an easy decision because I wanted to make sure that I make the right decision. As I said before, I always pray before I do anything. And before I made the decision, I prayed a long time. And I finally came up with one answer. And the answer is the association in Mississippi and the people of Mississippi need you more now than ever. Thank you very much. I just want you to know that I'm proud to know that you feel the same as I felt. And I will never leave you as long as you need me.
All right.
Because if I leave, I feel like Medgar's been left alone. I know it's rough. Thank you very much. We're going to move out now. Thank you very much again. We are going to mobilize our branches, and we're going to join the march as it gets near. The thing that I've said, and I still mean, that we are all in this fight together.
That's right. Say that.
But we're going to try to get those who are with us in Mississippi, who are marching through our state, to help us to do something that's going to really leave a lasting memory with those who have destroyed us so long. And that is, we hope that they will agree to let's register every Negro in every town that we pass through on our way from Memphis. And then I hope and trust that when they get to Jackson, we will take a switch and go over and hit Highway 61 and march back to Memphis and register every Negro in every county between Vicksburg and Memphis. Then that'll be the greatest contribution that Meredith have made and all of those who are down here and do for the Negro of Mississippi. Because in 1967 and 68, we'll be able to save you from coming down. We'll be able to save us from being mistreated by our police and by our highway department. But we can't do it until we're registered. So won't you please help us? And as you go back to New York and to California, you can say we paid our little part. We have to help Negroes to help themselves. We don't want any more pity. We're tired of being pitied. We just want to do what's to be done and do it now. We're going to march from the temple down to the Charity Baptist Church. We would like for all of you to follow the ministers and Mr. Wilkins and the platform guests as we march out of the auditorium. We're to march 4 abreast. We're to march to the facing the traffic. Now, I understand we have police escort out there. And as we told the city we want to march, we have a right to march. We hope they will protect and keep some nut from committing another crime. But they know we're going to march anyway. So I'd like for all of you to please